Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of our unit on surviving, persisting, and overcoming. We have been doing poetry, but we're going to do a speech this week instead by Queen Elizabeth of England, Queen Elizabeth I. And we're going to look at some of the poetry inside of her speech and analyze that this week. So you can actually see the speech is about the battle at Tilbury, which is actually in the background. Kind of see what's happening here, the destruction of the Spanish Armada that you'll be doing a little research on later. And it was important and a turning point in her reign. And so it's included in this very famous portrait of her. Now, let's go ahead and we're going to read some background. And if you feel like I'm going too fast as I'm reading, I have some visuals that I'm going to give you guys as soon as I'm done reading. But we'll kind of put all of this together, get some visuals to go into it, and then we'll go down to the speech. All right, so we are at Queen Elizabeth's speech to her troops at Tilbury in 1588. All right, so Queen Elizabeth became queen after the death of 3 of her father's heirs. So it was unbelievable that she actually became queen, maybe. First to die was her half brother, who was a Protestant. This is important. I kind of said who was Protestant and who was Catholic because it is part of the story of why she was in this battle. And her Protestant half brother, Edward VI, he came to the throne at 9, but died at 15 due to poor health. And he passed his crown on to Lady Jane Grey because he didn't want it to go to his Catholic sister. However, you cannot overstep the lines of succession. And so some people tried to put Lady Jane Grey on the throne, but it was looked at as treason because she wasn't actually the queen or an heir. So actually, they ended up executing her after she came to the palace. And then the throne was passed on to Elizabeth's half sister, who was Catholic, Queen Mary. And she took the throne for 5 years and became known as Bloody Mary because she would kill Protestants and wanted to return England to a Catholic state, which it hadn't been since her father. And Queen Mary married the Catholic Prince of Spain, but they had no heirs. In fact, when she died believing she was pregnant, but it's believed that she had like an extremely large growth on her womb that was making her appear pregnant, but she wasn't. And so she died. And so when she died, Elizabeth became the Queen of England, Elizabeth I. And it was a Protestant state again. So Queen Mary's death meant that Spain, they had married into the throne of England, and the Catholic Church had lost their hold on England. And so, as Queen Elizabeth became queen, she allowed piracy of Spanish ships that were returning from the Americas with gold and valuable spices and products. And for this and other reasons, not just that, that was a main reason. There were lots of secretive sort of reasons. Spain declared war on England with the backing of the Catholic Church. Elizabeth knew that if she allowed Spain to breach England's shores, she would probably be executed as not a legitimate heir because the Catholic Church didn't see her as a legitimate heir to the throne because of her marriage to the marriage of her father to her mother was not sanctioned by the Catholic Church, and so they didn't recognize it. And so they could actually say that she was treasonous, that she had seized the throne and was not the rightful heir, and execute her. And so after that, her Catholic cousin, Queen Mary of Scotland, Mary Queen of Scots as she's known, would become queen, and then the Catholic Church would once again have uh, be a part of England. This is the speech she gave her troops, which were actually farmers, army men, and nobles, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I know that was kind of a lot, but let's go through some of the history of this. We'll have to start with Elizabeth. She's right here. And we'll kind of have to go back all the way to her grandfather. So Henry the Seventh, he gave birth to a son who actually ended up dying and had been married to Catherine of Aragon, but he had another son. And his other son became Henry the Eighth. And Henry the Eighth married his brother's widow as part of I believe he liked her, but also it was a part of a treaty they were having with Spain. She was a Spanish princess, basically. But he was not able, he had Mary, Queen of Scots, but she was not able to bear him a son. And he also fell in love with Anne Boleyn. And so he broke with the Catholic Church and made England into a Protestant state, and then actually made an entirely different church called the Church of England that is still used today in England. And he sent Catherine of Aragon back to Spain, or I can't remember, maybe he locked her up. I can't remember, but I think he sent her back to Spain with his daughter, Queen Mary. And then he married Anne Boleyn. So that's why the Catholic Church doesn't see Queen Elizabeth as a legitimate heir. And he believed that Anne Boleyn was treasonous, and he executed her. You can see his many wives. He executed them, well, almost all of them. Then he married Jane Seymour, had King Edward VI, the young king we talked about, and she actually died of natural causes. Anne of Cleves, he married her, but while he was married to her, fell in love with Catherine Howard, and he got himself annulled from Anne of Cleves and gave her a nice place to live in England, and kind of just pushed her aside and married Catherine Howard. And then you can see Catherine Parr as well, who he also, I believe he executed Catherine Howard. He didn't execute all of his wives, just several of them. And I think it was for treason because she got involved with an affair with somebody else that she was executed. And then he married Catherine Parr, and he actually died while he was married to Catherine Parr. Now, so line of succession goes to boys first. But unlike other countries, once the boys die, it doesn't have to go to the next male heir. It can just go to any female heir. And so Edward died. Then it goes to Queen Mary. And then once Mary dies, then Elizabeth becomes queen. Now, it had been many years, many marriages, and King Edward was Protestant before Queen Mary, our Bloody Mary, came along and said that England needed to change back to a Catholic state, and um, began executing Protestant priests and Protestants as well. And so eventually, when Elizabeth became queen, she said that Catholics and Protestants could be in England, both of them at the same time, but it was not a Catholic state, which would have been preferred by the Catholic Church. So that was kind of where I was going with that. Now, if Elizabeth was declared illegitimate by the Catholic Church, what would happen is then we go over to the line of succession, and we'd see that his sister, who had died and who had married several men, but she'd married, and eventually one of her children had children, who was eventually Mary, Queen of Scots, who was also Catholic. And so way down the line of succession, she would have been the Catholic queen that the Catholic Church wanted. And actually, eventually, she had married Francis II, but he died, and she married Henry Stuart and gave birth to King James I, who eventually did become Elizabeth's successor because Elizabeth didn't marry anyone. And so it kind of gives you the background, like who's Catholic, who's not, why is Elizabeth queen, and what is some of the history between some of these people. And let's talk about Tilbury. So I'm going to go over to that. That was a funny picture there. So let's go over to this picture. So what happens, you've got Spain down here. And so Spain, the Spanish Armada, which was very famous as the best, basically, navy in all of England, well, in all of Europe. And so the Spanish Armada set off, and it was seen over here, and then it was breaching through the channel. Now they wouldn't want to try and take England here, because then that would be a long fight to London, which is the capital, which is where the Queen is. So they actually sailed through the English Channel here, and they came up to here. This kind of tells you what may have what kind of happened here at Tilbury. But they tried to land closer to London. So once they landed, they wouldn't have to march too far to get to the capital. And so as they're getting ready to breach the shores here and battle it out here, uh, the the English can see them. They've seen them off the coast the entire time, and they're getting ready to land for a battle. And this is the speech that Elizabeth gave her troops. Um, as she's standing on the shores now, it's important to note that she was not in London, just awaiting her fate. She went down to the battle. She put armor on herself. That's what people say generally. Put armor on herself, got on a horse, and told all of her people, "I will be out here with you, so you are fighting for your queen, because I will die in this battle." Because basically she would have been executed if she if they lost anyway. And so as kind of a motivating force of like protecting their queen, not metaphorically speaking, but literally, she gave this speech and gave them several reasons why they should why they should fight, not just for her, but also other reasons, which is what you're going to kind of need to pick out as we're reading this. So, how does Queen Elizabeth use her wording in a poetic and effective way to support her argument? But also, you need to tell me, tell me what is her purpose and what are the different arguments she uses. So, it's really what is the purpose? What are the arguments? And then how are those arguments supported by good diction, by good wording? And so, what I'm going to do as I go through is circle words that I feel, or phrases that have strong, powerful meanings behind them. And then you could, or I could, if I were writing the question answers, um, then you can use that, or you can use your own if you want to print this out in your paragraph. So, my loving people. So, if we're thinking ethos, logos, and pathos, her loving people, it's a very emotional word. We have been persuaded by some that are careful of our safety to take heed how we commit ourselves to armed multitudes for fear of treachery. But I assure you, I do not desire to live to distrust my faithful and loving people. Now, she's referring to the idea of who she's let into her army. And she's going to kind of go into this a little bit further down. But she allowed farmers and army men and nobles and people that weren't necessarily in her army to fight at this battle, because she needed everyone she could. And generally in England, you would purchase a commission in the army. But instead, she said, anyone that will fight, I will give you money. So it's actually kind of the opposite of what normally happened. And so, she's saying, people have told me that, I should maybe watch out for the armed multitudes and maybe fear treachery, because you are all armed soldiers. She said, but you are my faithful and loving people, which is more saying I can trust you maybe even more than an army, because you are my people. And so again, she's mentioning this people, this idea of almost like they're her children. And she uses her womanhood in a very sort of different way, in the way she refers to herself as a woman, which in the 1500s wouldn't have been the best position to be in as a leader. And also this idea of just her faithful and loving people in a very motherly way. So let tyrants fear. Let tyrants fear their people, she's saying. I am not a tyrant, in other words. I have always so behaved myself that under God I have placed my chiefest strength and strong guard in the loyal hearts and goodwill of my subjects. So again, she's kind of bringing this idea of her subjects and that they're good people that are fighting here and that she believes in them and that she knows that they're good, and almost perhaps this idea of, tyrant should fear of this good versus evil. They are good and the people seeking to invade them are bad. And therefore I am come amongst you, as you see, at this time, not for my recreation and disport, but being resolved in the midst of the heat of battle to live and die amongst you all. So she put on her armor and she wasn't going to sit up on a hill and watch to see what the outcome was, which is what kings sometimes did, or princes. But she's saying, I will be here in the midst of battle. So you need to defend me because I could die. Even if we win this, I could die. To lay down for my people, well, for my God, for my kingdom, and for my people, my honor, my blood, even to the dust. So she's saying that she's willing to step up and be a subject of England and fight with them. She's fighting for them. She's fighting for the greater idea of her kingdom. And she is fighting for God as well. So, this idea of good versus evil, and they are on the right side. And so, she's kind of building up a sort of morale here and creating this sort of I am with you. Um, Not just I am a king above you, but I am a soldier with you. And I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman. And I feel like we transition to a different idea here. It's kind of, morale boosting, and I believe in you. Whereas this part, I am a weak and feeble woman, because she was often battled in her life being a woman and, men wanting her to get married. That's why she never got married, because that means she would have had to share her power with someone. And so she always had to battle this idea of, maybe her being illegitimate and this weak and feeble woman, and see how she can turn this weakness into a strength. I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and the stomach of the king, of a king, and the king of England too. And so kind of saying like, yes, this is what my body is, but my heart, and I am an heir. She often, had to fight against this being illegitimate claim. And, she would often say, I am my father's daughter. In fact, she would make her hair a little bit redder than it actually was, because King Henry VIII was known for his extremely red hair. And so she would make hers even redder because she wanted to remind people that I am my father's daughter and I am descendant of King of England and I have the heart and the stomach. And to think foul scorn that Parma or Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm. So again, she's claiming this, and trying to build up this idea of England and what she is and what England is, and that it's wrong that somebody would try to invade like their land. Because she's saying, I love my people. And then she's trying to give them this sense of honor and being English and wanting them to fight for that as well. Should dare to invade the borders of my realm, to which rather than any dishonor shall grow by me, I myself will take up arms. I myself will be your general, judge, and rewarder of every one of the virtues on the field. So again, she's mentioned that she trusts them. And now she's not just saying, I'm paying you, but she's saying, I will reward you. Because although all of the philosophies of love of country and queen go far, money is also a very motivating factor for armies. And so she's saying, I will be your rewarder as well. So you want me to live, because if I live, you get paid. If I die, you don't get paid. That's really what it comes down to. I know already for your forwardness, you have deserved rewards and crowns. And we do assure you on a word of a prince. So again, they shall be duly paid. So again, this idea of on the word of a prince, and I have the stomach of the king of England, and she admits, I am a weak and feeble woman, but I am your king, almost like she's saying. And she's again saying, I'm going to reward you. You're going to be paid. You deserve rewards and crowns. When I say crowns, she doesn't mean she's going to give them crowns for their heads. Like crowns would be a monetary unit in England. In the meantime, my lieutenant general shall be in my stead. Then whomever prince commanded a more noble and worthy subject, not doubting, but by your obedience to my general, by your concord in the camp and your valor in the field, we shall shortly have famous victory, true story, over these enemies of my God, of my kingdom, and of my people. And so again, she's using. I'll tell you that's one of my sort of poetic devices. Her repetition comes in once again, and as you go through and kind of think about the poetry behind this, think about some of the words she uses, how she lists things. Look at some of the sounds as well. And so she's giving them the sort of love and trust. And here she's saying, I am a king of England, you can follow me. And then here she's talking about the most motivating factor, money. And then also touches on the idea of fame, of getting glory from the battlefield. And so look for instances of repetition. That's kind of like my hint for how you can look at how does she use her wording in a poetic and effective way. A lot of it is how she lists things. It's called parallelism when you say like, my God, my kingdom, my people, and you use the same sort of word over and over in a list. That's called creating parallelism. You're making all of your words parallel, and it makes it easier to remember and understand. So you can mention parallelism in there, but also kind of look for repetition, but other things that she does. So again, what I want you to do, and you'll need to read over it again. So I'll erase this, but I want you to look for are her, what is her main goal? Like what is her main purpose? And then once you've decided that, the what are the arguments that she makes? I would say she makes 3, quite possibly. You could probably say 2, but 3, maybe even 4 if you wanted to break them up differently. But I'm going to be looking for at least 3 different arguments that I mentioned here. If you want to kind of go into 4 or 5 and break them into pieces, you can. But you can also talk about ethos, logos, and pathos. Like, what are some techniques that she uses? To identify what is her purpose, and then what are the arguments she makes to support that purpose. There's at least 3. And then how does she how is she effective with wording within those arguments? Because we can say lots of things. She could have said, okay, guys, like, I trust you and I am your king, even though I'm a woman and I'm paying you. So do it. I mean, but that's just not the same as what she said. So kind of go through and look for those really strong pieces of wording and diction. And then what I'd like you to do. I'm holding myself back because I would really love to tell you the story because it's very exciting about what happens at Tilbury. But research online. Tell me who won the battle. It was England. But tell me, how did they win? Because that's the really exciting, and it could have been like a disaster. It was like a very specific things had to happen for them to win, and they did. And how long was the battle approximately? Um, and so, and when they did win, it crippled the Spanish Armada. And when you kind of tell me how did they win, you'll realize why the Spanish Armada was so crippled that Spain was actually no longer a world power from this point on. And so it's very interesting. So, but you can find that out yourself. All right. Well, good luck this week. I look forward to reading your questions. I'll leave this right here in case you want to pause and look at it. Bye, guys.